Very delicate road trip. This weekend, the Royal Ontario Museum opened the doors on an exhibit called Egyptian Art in the Age of the Pyramid. It's a joint project between the Louvre in Paris, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the ROM. It's an exhibition that's been drawing huge crowds and rave reviews at every stop. Throughout this week, we'll be examining some of those Egyptian treasures and exploring some of the mysteries of Egyptian culture. Tonight, archaeologist Julian Siggers takes us behind the scenes for a look at the careful preparations that help turn a collection of artifacts into a show.
Egyptian art in the age of the pyramids. The pieces in this show have endured more than 4,000 years of history. This is their latest stop in their journey through time. Brought together from more than 30 museums worldwide, the show is a stunning testimony to immortality, the belief in the afterlife that was at the very core of Egyptian philosophy. But how these pieces got here is a story unto itself. 3 weeks ago, the cargo, valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars, arrived at the loading dock of the Royal Ontario Museum. What's inside is irreplaceable. Representing 150 years of archaeological research, it's a world-class show with security restrictions to match. We can't even show you the name of the moving van, but we can tell you it's been outfitted with a unique cushioned suspension, so the artifacts inside had the smoothest ride possible from Manhattan.
Okay, now let's get past me.
The security team that travel with the trucks hasn't had much sleep. They pulled an all-nighter, clearing customs at Buffalo, finally breathing a sigh of relief as the trucks reach home base. Also escorting the artifacts are the couriers, representatives from museums around the world who make sure their pieces have arrived intact.
And you'll have to give us a bit of time in the morning just to get organized.
They're greeted by Laurie Drusian, project manager with the Royal Ontario Museum.
My role as project manager really is to lead a group of people so that they can get to a wonderful end. And the end being, in this case, the opening of a project. If I can use the analogy of a traffic cop as well, it's really to move information from place to place.
There are more than 200 artifacts in the show, from delicate pieces of jewelry to stone statues weighing more than a ton. All of it is precious. No one knows that better than Chris Zimski, senior curator of the show. When this priceless material arrived from New York, what was going through your head?
I was absolutely thrilled, and I was thrilled to see the stuff being unpacked. I was touching even the crates. I was so happy. It's something that is very difficult to describe in words because it's a very internal, it's a feeling. It's something that happens to you perhaps once in your lifetime. And I think for me, certainly, I consider it the peak of my curatorial career. I don't imagine doing another show even better than that. I think this is the best, number one.
Once the crates have been accounted for, they're marked for delivery to the right location. The museum redesigned 2 galleries specifically for the show. Every object has its place, meticulously mapped out on paper. Now the real test, bringing the show to life.
The most challenging aspect probably has been trying to deal with the weights of the objects. We've had to make sure that we understand the various aspects of the needs of all the lenders, whether it was security issues, conservation issues, mounting issues, temperature issues, humidity issues. And then with each object, we documented and kept quite detailed information documents that tracked the needs of each object.
What would be a typical humidity issue?
Some objects require a humidity of 50 and over, for instance, like the wood boxes or the jewelry pieces. And in the winter months in the main building of the ROM, the humidity isn't that high. So we have to be concerned about how we can maintain that environment for that specific object or for a group of objects.
The museum is reluctant to talk about the cost of insurance, but it's in the millions of dollars. Motion detectors have been put in place, and extra security guards have been hired for the duration of the show. The unpacking is done by the couriers themselves, as well as employees of the museum called preparators. The pieces are then checked for damage. Condition reports are filled out, which compare every detail, every scratch on the artifact before and after its journey. For works of art that have endured thousands of years, their previous 24 hours are getting an awful lot of attention.
These are the condition photographs, and we just check through each one, me and the local conservator,
Just at the front, if I could just mark the back of them.
and just look for things that have changed. I mean, you know, 99.9% of the time nothing happens.
Most of the pieces will be surrounded by plexiglass, not just to protect them from being touched, but because moisture from human breath can damage artifacts, especially those made of wood.
I think what we'll do, we'll just concentrate on the plexiglass, and then they could come and figure it out themselves. Okay. Because we're losing time.
The staff here is under a lot of pressure. They've been given only 3 weeks to mount the show, and that's half the time New York had. And if that deadline isn't stressful enough, there is that other consideration, that what they're handling is priceless. Bernard Godin is one of the preparators.
We never pay attention to it. Most pieces here are worth about $2 million a piece. So if you do, you would just go crazy. I mean, you can't. Okay.
But the tension is definitely high when this is wheeled in. It's a gantry, a lifting device that will put in place the showpiece of the exhibit. It lies in this crate, a statue from the 4th dynasty that is one of the great icons of Egyptian art. Its caretaker is Jean-Louis Lechevre from the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. He's a conservation engineer, and this crate is just his toolbox.
You'll see as we take it apart all the steel that's on the object to protect it. Because we designed also not only for earthquakes, but we designed it for severe crash or accident. We are trying to anticipate the worst possibilities, not by plane, but by truck or car.
When we come back, the king and queen of the show take their place of honor as all... Just before the break, archaeologist Julian Siggers was helping us follow the progress of some very rare treasures, the 200 pieces that make up an exhibition of Egyptian art at the Royal Ontario Museum. Well, the stars of this show have arrived and are ready to take their places. It's been a 4,000-year journey, and the last few steps are by far the most treacherous.
The unveiling of Menkare and Queen will take the team a full day. First, the wooden crate in which it was transported is carefully removed. Beneath that is another case made of steel. The combined weight is 1.5 tons. Over a period of several hours, it is rigged to the gantry, which, through a system of gears, raises the case upright, a fraction of an inch at a time. No hydraulics, no forklift. The courier prefers a manual system, with less chance of mechanical failure. This is the first time the statue has left the Boston Museum since the 1920s, and there's no room for mistakes.
So I heard that this thing could withstand anything.
Literally.
Literally,
Yeah,
right?
anything.
So if we want, so the safest place to be is inside that crate.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Fong Pin Lee is the show's designer. She chose a location for the statue, the color behind it, and is responsible for maximizing the impact of every single piece. When the king and queen are finally revealed, she saw more than their beauty. She saw a satisfying conclusion to months of work.
I'm actually really thrilled. In fact, there's some details in it that I didn't realize was there before, like the details, the subtleties of the face and the double chin and the sense of the humanness of it and the imperfection of it. So I'm thrilled because I have a 100-foot sight line to this piece, and if it didn't look this good, I'd be in trouble.
A few days later, curator Chris Jimsky savors the piece he fought so hard to get. Even though it's only on loan, having it here is somewhat of a coup in museum circles, and he's loving every minute of it.
it itself is a wonderful piece of art. If you look at his face, it's idealized, and at the same time it shows details. His mysterious smile, his slightly bulbous eyes, rounded nose, full cheeks. I mean, he's not really that beautiful if you look at close detail from close distance, and yet it's very appealing, very dramatic, and so peaceful.
And a slight smile, you were saying.
Yes, that's how I see it. It's perhaps sometimes more visible on photographs even than an actual statue, depending on where you're standing. Very much like Mona Lisa, you know, with this mysterious smile, and smiling for eternity, smiling for 4,500 years.
And looking perfect.
And looking perfect, exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about art in the Old Kingdom?
That's when Egyptian art was created. Not just the Egyptian, this is really the beginning of art of the mankind. This is the earliest great art on Earth, on the planet. We are talking about the period 4,500 years ago. We have to think of time scale. You know, we are living much closer to the days of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra than they in relation to the Old Kingdom. This is something to keep in perspective, and I think the most astonishing aspect of this exhibition is for the visitors to discover that those Egyptians were very much like us, that they are not that strange. They don't sort of walk like an Egyptian all the time, only in reliefs. In the sculpture, this is astonishingly similar to our present art, our present aesthetics, and I think that's what people will really find fascinating.
These artifacts are from a culture that really celebrated death. How did you bring these artifacts to life?
Well, that's not so difficult when you consider that for the Egyptians, in death, there is life. So all these artifacts around you, these statues, these reliefs, they represent the flora, the fauna, love, what is great about their intellect and what they consider beautiful. It's all in front of us here. This is life.
The show was arranged chronologically, but a lot of attention was paid to developing themes.
For example, I could put together a carrying chair for the queen next to a beautiful beaded dress, next to a beautiful sculpture of an alabaster woman, and next to jewelry case, and then follow that with a beautiful couple embracing. So then we could pull all these two things together, which have this accoutrements, feminine accoutrements, and of love.
And although they're reluctant to admit it, everyone working on the show has a favorite piece.
The one that I'm most amused by is a pair statue of a man and wife. And he's a little taller than his wife, and he has his arm over her shoulder and holding her breast. And she's sort of looking away with this wide-eyed stare. And I just find the wonderful sense of humor that in 4,500 years, nothing's really changed.
The show continues until May. Then the pieces will return to their home museums. But for a time, they're reunited to give a glimpse of their world to ours. So how has this process been?
The project's been actually quite wonderful to work on. It's been stressful at times. It's been a long year of work. There are times when you just leave the building and you never want to come back. And there are other times it's the only thing that keeps you coming in the morning. At the end of the day, it's been a great project, and I've had a wonderful team, and I hope that people then, the visitors who come to visit the exhibition, will feel that energy and will really enjoy the visit.
So that's how the pieces get to the museum. But of course, the story doesn't end there. Throughout this week, we'll be exploring some of the mysteries of Egyptian culture, and we'll learn more about the people who created the treasures that make up the exhibition. Tomorrow, a trip to the ancient Egyptian beauty parlor. When it came to keeping up appearances, Egyptian women went to some unbelievable extremes. Art and culture of ancient Egypt. That's because the Royal Ontario Museum has just unveiled a new exhibition of Egyptian art and we were given exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the collection. Tonight, archaeologist Julian Siggers helps uncover some of the secrets behind Egyptian beauty in the days of the pyramid.
The styling, the primping, the brushing and the spraying. For millions of us, this is just part of daily life, a routine we undertake without much thought. Well, the next time you get caught up in the pressure to look your best, consider this. Our affection for all things cosmetic has deep, ancient roots. We have a lot in common with the Egyptians of the Old Kingdom. Makeup, hairstyles, and jewelry were absolute musts. And according to Egyptologist Roberta Shaw, even 4,500 years ago, the quest for beauty was an important facet of everyday living.
We do know that a well-dressed person would always have their eye makeup on, their wonderful eye makeup on, and probably a little bit of rouge and lipstick as well. We're not quite so sure of that one. Wigs were extremely important. The hair always had to look absolutely perfect.
So much so that hairdressing was an occupation. Egyptian hair was probably kept quite short, but it was adorned with elaborate wigs, often designed with lots of curls and cornrows. The statues of the time deliberately show the subject's natural hairline peeking from beneath a perfectly coiffed wig. You can tell by this collection of artifacts just how important daily grooming was to ancient Egyptians. You could call this a cosmetic counter of sorts, albeit a rusty one. There are mirrors, tweezers, razor blades, and a myriad of containers for colorful powdered makeup. The minerals used to comprise the makeup were readily available in the desert. They were gathered there by locals and bartered to the villagers at market. The dark eyeliner was a lead and sulfur compound that could be ground by hand, just like the green malachite eyeshadow that was especially fashionable throughout the Old Kingdom. It was applied heavily all around the eyes on both women and men. Although it could be very detrimental to one's health, Egyptians believed it could also prevent eye infection, a disease that was very difficult to cure in ancient times.
The Old Kingdom lasted about 500 years. Now just imagine how our own daily lives and styles have changed in a period that long. Well, the Egyptians weren't like that. They were known for being changeless. The royal family would set the trend, and everybody else would just conform. So for 5 centuries, everybody in ancient Egypt looked, well, like everybody else.
The Egyptians were an extremely social, hierarchical society, and they definitely wanted to compete with and look like everybody else. And there were these standards of beauty which they all aspired to. The jewelry is all the same. The clothing is basically all the same. When you look at an Egyptian wall painting, they're very beautiful, but everybody is, there's a lot of sameness to it, sameness to everybody. I expect that the idea of individuality was not really admired. They were a people that very much liked order over chaos, and there is a certain chaotic element to extreme individuality.
In fact, if we were to look into the closet of an ancient Egyptian woman, you'd see just one item of clothing, the little white dress.
Good white linen as best as you could afford, so everyone wore the same style. You've got your poor women and your rich women with the same style. Your quality is what counts, and of course on top of that, your quality of jewelry.
While a poor person may only be able to afford a simple string of beads and burlap quality linen, a noble would be adorned with a broad collar necklace with hundreds of colored beads, and the finest quality linen was reserved for royalty with a count of 200 threads per inch. Looking good was not just a female pursuit. Men wore just as much makeup and jewelry as women did, but their clothing was simpler. A white linen kilt wrapped at the waist was all they wore. Even that didn't change for hundreds of years. Children were viewed as naturally beautiful and often wore nothing but makeup and jewelry until puberty. Since there is no biographical texts from the period, Egyptologists must rely on art and artifacts found in tombs to piece together everything they know about daily life in the Old Kingdom. A beautiful box like this one would store linen and jewelry. When a person died, Their tomb was filled with statues and objects representing their desires in the afterlife. These statues of an everyday cook and bread maker, for example, were designed to provide eternal sustenance to the deceased. In fact, many tombs were adorned with scenes from daily life, a testament to the sense of joie de vivre.
Certainly the evidence we have from tomb paintings, especially the daily life scenes that we see, point to they enjoyed life greatly. We've got lovely party scenes, we have dancers, we have singers, we have comic scenes. I think if a people can depict comic scenes in their daily life to laugh, obviously they like to laugh, and we see that sort of thing, and yes, they look as if they're having just a grand time for all eternity.
In many ways, life was so good for Old Kingdom Egyptians that they didn't view eternity as something better or different. To them, eternity was simply an ideal of the daily life they were already living.
All throughout this week, we'll be examining the culture that influenced the art that's on display at the Royal Ontario Museum. It's Egypt Week, and we'll be leaving very few stones unturned.
On Wednesday, it's the biggest construction riddle of them all. 20 years, 2.5 million stones, and at least 20,000 men. That's what it took to build the Great Pyramid.
The people who built it were not slaves. They were peasant farmers who were paying part of their taxes, as it were, in their own physical labor.
But the question remains, how did they do it? We'll explore some of the theories on Wednesday. Thursday, a feature on an unsung hero of Egyptology, a Canadian named Trick Corelli. Almost 100 years ago, he ventured along the Nile with one purpose in mind, to bring ancient Egypt home to Canada.
He's the first Canadian who brought back so much volume of material, from Egypt especially, and arranged to have it where the public could see it.
An adventurer, a digger, a museum builder, a profile of Trick Corelli. On Friday, the discovery that opened up the entire world of ancient Egypt. For 2,000 years, no one could figure out what hieroglyphs were really saying. That is, until 1799, when a mysterious stone was unearthed in the hills of Egypt, the Rosetta Stone.
This meant we could understand Egyptian history. We could get some sense of who the kings were, and it also opened things like their own thoughts to us.
Cracking the code of hieroglyphs with a little help from ancient Greek.
News about technique, some new ideas about an ancient mystery. Hello and welcome back to At Discovery Canada. I'm Jill Deacon. Jay is off sick tonight. We're hoping he'll be better by tomorrow. In a moment, one of the grandest construction projects of all time is also one of the most mysterious. The muscle power and the brain power that helped raise the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Also coming up in this half hour, lunching on lemurs. If you came face to face with this animal in Madagascar, would you know what to call it? The right answer could save your life on the Mindbender. And chew your gum, it's good for you. How a common childhood ailment can be treated with candy. But first, the structures that really put Egypt on the map. Cleopatra, the Sphinx, King Tut, they all bring to mind the glories of ancient Egypt, but those symbols pale in the shadow of the Great Pyramids. Not only are those structures architectural marvels, they were also an inspiration for centuries of art. The cultural achievements made by Egyptians during the age of the pyramids are currently on display at the Royal Ontario Museum, and we were given generous access to the collection. Throughout this week, archaeologist Julian Siggers has been our tour guide through the world of ancient Egypt. Tonight, he examines a puzzle that's been plaguing scholars for more than 4,000 years.
Egyptian pyramids. These two words hold a sense of wonder and mystery that cannot be overstated. For 4,500 years, the monuments at Giza have gripped our imaginations and sent us on a quest for answers. Who built them? How could these massive structures be assembled in a time when technology didn't even include the wheel? The Giza Plateau is situated across the Nile from Cairo. It is a steep geological formation and sits high above the green cultivated land of the valley below. It's truly a striking sight, Untouched, it was the perfect place for 3 of Egypt's Old Kingdom pharaohs to build their final resting places. The first one built is the largest and now known simply as the Great Pyramid. It belonged to the pharaoh Khufu and was built around 2600 BC. Next came the pyramid of the pharaoh Khafre. The third was built about 70 years after the Great Pyramid, and it belonged to Menkure. The pyramid shape evolved over time. Its origins lie in the form of a rectangular tomb with sloping sides called a mastaba, an Arabic word meaning bench. The very first pyramid was a series of mastabas piled one on top of another and called the step pyramid. The pyramids at Giza modified that architecture, smoothing the sides by encasing the structure in limestone blocks. There's barely anything left of that outer layer now. The limestone was pilfered in Roman times for other construction projects. This is an original block from the facing of Khafre's pyramid. At the time the pyramids were completed, this limestone would have been polished to such a degree that it must have hurt to gaze at the monument. To this day, there are misconceptions about the people who built these so-called resurrection machines. Hollywood has perpetuated the myth that they were built by slaves. Egyptologists like Nick Millett want to see the record set straight.
They had a system of forced labor, conscripted labor, as it were, on public works, and that's what they used to build the pyramid. The people who built it were not slaves. They were peasant farmers who were paying part of their taxes, as it were, in their own physical labor for a few months every year.
And there is growing evidence of those young farmers on the site at Giza.
Dr. Zaki Hawass of the Egyptian Antiquities Service has been doing a lot of work on the Giza Plateau, and he's found the city, or the town, I guess, the pyramid town where the workers lived. And he's found the bakeries where the bread was made, the breweries where the beer was made, and a great huge fish processing plant. So the young lads who worked on that had a lot of protein, a lot of beer, ate very well, and I think we're finding where they lived. I think we know now where they were.
This is a statue of the man who oversaw those workers, the architect of the Great Pyramid. He was a pretty powerful individual. In fact, he's a pretty big guy, like his job. He managed about 20,000 workers over a 20-year period. At the end of this time, they had built a monument that was to be the tallest on Earth until the advent of Gothic cathedrals 4,000 years later.
The figures are staggering. The Great Pyramid contains about 2.5 million stone blocks. Napoleon's scholars calculated that the stones from the 3 pyramids were enough to build a wall 1 foot wide and 10 feet high all around France. But without the invention of the wheel and no pulleys or levers, how did the ancient Egyptians maneuver these blocks, which averaged about 2.5 tons apiece? It would have probably taken 8 men about 10 days to quarry stone, float it across the Nile, and get it onto the top of the pyramid. It is known that they used sleds to pull large objects on a road made slick with water. So they could pull them, but how did they move them up? Well, there's no shortage of theories, but Egyptologists entertain a variation on just one, and that is that the pyramids were built using ramps. The ramp theories are based on the evidence of ramp remains at Giza and of pictures of ramps in art.
So the question is really, what kind of a ramp system are you going to use? My own feeling is that you can't explain all the pyramids that were built in the Old Kingdom by the same ramp system. I imagine the ramp system evolved the same way the size and the complexity of the pyramid complex did.
The first theory suggests that the Egyptians built a single ramp, which increased in height along with the pyramid, allowing men to drag the blocks up on sleds. But there are problems with this system. Since the ramp can't be overly steep, the length of the ramp would also have to keep increasing. By the end of the construction, the ramp alone would stretch almost 2 kilometers and contain 3 or 4 times more material than the pyramid itself. The ramp building would have ended up taking more time than the pyramid building. So a ramp this size seems impractical. A more accepted notion is the 4-ramp theory. A ramp would start at each corner and wrap around the pyramid like a barber pole. The problem with this system is that workers could only see the level they were working on at that time because everything below would be covered in ramp material. So how would they know if they were keeping the edges straight? Despite the unanswered questions, it's still one of the most widely accepted theories. Old Kingdom construction tools were simple at best, and there are some which seem to have an unknown purpose, like cradles. Models of them have been found in tombs, and many believe that they were used in place of sleds to rock the boulders up the ramps. The latest version of the cradle theory comes from a Cambridge engineer. Dick Parry believes sleds would have required too many workers and thinks the multiple ramps could not sustain them. He suggests that 4 cradles were wrapped around a block forming a cylinder and that the cylinder was then coiled with rope. As the workers dragged it uphill, the rope would gradually uncoil and the boulder would have rolled upwards, minimizing the amount of manpower needed. But there are people like Maureen Clements who have completely different ideas. The California woman has been working on her own theory that the Egyptians harnessed the power of the strong desert winds by using ancient types of kites to raise the giant blocks into place. In an attempt to prove her theory, she successfully demonstrated the power of the wind in field experiments. Her team of family and friends watched as a 180-kilogram obelisk tethered to a kite was raised to a vertical position. Clemens' next step is to try and raise a 40-ton obelisk and build a mini-pyramid with a dozen blocks. While it may be intriguing to consider other ways that the blocks could have been moved, Egyptologist Gail Gibson sticks to the more accepted theory.
There's no evidence at all from ancient Egypt of kites or parachutes, which is too bad, but you've got to have some evidence before you can have a theory, I think. It seems to me that the most reasonable one is the ramps, and a lot of ropes, and a lot of men, and extraordinarily good organization.
Beyond the mystery of how Egyptians physically built the pyramids, there is another fundamental problem that puzzles archaeologists. How did they rally the workforce of an entire country with such precision and instill in them a massive yet common goal?
And I think that's the extraordinary thing, that you've got a workforce there all year round who are preparing for this great onslaught so that during the inundation, for the 3 months of the year when people can't work on the land, every able-bodied man in Egypt must have been brought to that site and put on the ropes, hauling those things up. Every one of those men had to be fed, clothed, and given lots of beer and kept in a good mood. And he needed medical attention. That's the extraordinary thing to me. I don't think we could do that.
Of course, there's much more to ancient Egypt than the Great Pyramids, and we will keep exploring as Egypt Week continues.
Thursday, a feature on an unsung hero of Egyptology, a Canadian named Trick Corelli. Almost 100 years ago, he ventured along the Nile with one purpose in mind, to bring ancient Egypt home to Canada.
He's the first Canadian who brought back so much volume of material, from Egypt especially, and arranged to have it where the public could see it.
An adventurer, a digger, a museum builder, a profile of Trick Corelli. On Friday, the discovery that opened up the entire world of ancient Egypt. For 2,000 years, no one could figure out what hieroglyphs were really saying. That is, until 1799, when a mysterious stone was unearthed in the hills of Egypt, the Rosetta Stone.
This meant we could understand Egyptian history. We could get some sense of who the kings were, and it also opened things like their own thoughts to us.
Cracking the code of hieroglyphs with a little help from ancient Greek.